What's up everyone, Steven here from TechMaker. This is building an NFT bookstore part 3. In the last episode, we essentially just got the very basics of our contracts set up and working. We wrote a test here, and we're basically just going to keep going in this episode. I'm not 100% sure where we're going to get to. This contract is going to have a fair amount of functionality, so I just kind of want to spend maybe 2 or 3 episodes just kind of doing this test-driven development and pushing this contract forward. So we'll see where we get to. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that I want to handle is right now we have this hard-coded with an ID of 1. Right here. And what we actually want to do is keep some kind of global book ID that we increase every single time we mint a new or publish a new book. So the first time we publish a book, it should have an ID of 1. The second time we publish a book, it can have an ID of 2. It's sort of like similar to if you've added records into a database, the database will automatically add an ID to each new row that gets added. So that's basically what we want to do here. And I'm going to write a new test for this. And again, this is sort of meticulous, like we could write the code a lot faster in theory if we didn't write tests for it. But I just like doing this for smart contracts because you really want things to be right as much as possible, or totally. So basically what we're going to do is say it increases the let's say book ID let's just say it increases the book ID. So we have describe publishing up here as the section we're in. So publishing increases the book ID. That's succinct and gets the point across. Okay, so we'll make this async. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new bookstore. So here's the thing. A lot of times, and this is very common in these truffle tests, you'll see a before block, and it'll actually like pull out the. I'm not going to write this correctly, but we could have like the deployer go ahead and deploy a bookstore contract to the blockchain up front, and then just reference that deployed bookstore all the time. The reason I'm doing this is because when I'm setting up these test scenarios, calling bookstore.new here is giving me a fresh contract with no state. So that means that like I can assume, the first book I publish should have an ID of 1, the second book should be 2. If I'm constantly referencing a previously deployed bookstore, I've got to do a little bit more work to keep track of what the state should be, and I don't really want to do that. I just wanted to add that little bit because often around the web you'll see bookstore equals bookstore.deployed, which would actually look, and we haven't actually written a deploy script, so there's nothing deployed. So we're deploying a new one whenever we call .new. Anyway, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, just don't worry about it. We'll just bypass that. But anyway, let's do, so we're basically starting here with a fresh bookstore. So we can say const author equals, and we can grab any account. So we'll say accounts 3, and then we'll do await bookstore dot publish, and we'll just pass in a quantity here. It doesn't matter, 75, and then we'll do from author. And then what we can do is go ahead and check the well, let's do this. Let's publish again, and let's run the test and just see if it explodes, because it might explode. It might just revert, because I think that ERC 1155 probably has some logic in there that says you can't reuse the same ID, but let's check. I don't actually know. So it might break, it might not break. Let's see what happens here. Nope, we got 2 passing tests. So it doesn't care, apparently, if we use a unique ID or not. So it's up to us to make sure that we use a unique ID here. So what I want to do is, I guess I can actually say, we can use this same test here and say the balance of author to because remember, we're expecting after this second publishing, that should have an ID of 2. So we're saying, give me the balance of author for the book with the ID 2, and that should be 50. And so this is not directly testing that we're incrementing. It's more sort of indirectly testing it by the fact that incrementing the ID to 2 should in fact give us a balance with that ID. So let's run the test here. This should fail because we're not ever incrementing the ID. So I don't know if this is the best way to test this, but it should work. So yeah, so we get a balance of 0, which we should expect because we didn't actually set that ID up. So now we've got a failing test, so we can write some code that will fix it. And basically what I want to do is I'll have like a private integer that I'm going to essentially increment every time we publish a book. So we could just say uint 256 private, and then we'll just say last book ID or something like that. And I guess in the constructor we could say last book ID equals 0 maybe. This may not be the best approach to this. I need to think about this. So maybe we should say current book ID. And let's set that to 1. And then what we can do here is say current book ID. So we're going to mint with the current book ID. And then we can just say current book ID plus equals 1. Okay, pretty straightforward. So we go ahead and mint with whatever the current book ID is, and then we update the current book ID so that the next time around it gets set to 2. So we can run our test now, and this should be passing. Cool. So what I want to do next, actually the first thing I want to do, remember when we looked at our data model, when we publish something, we're actually not publishing the book. What we're publishing is the book version. So like we said, Lord of the Rings first edition or something like that. So I'm going to update this just so we don't get ourselves confused. Book version ID. Because we're going to have book ID as well. Sorry, I got a plane flying over if you hear that. So we'll just run that test again. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. And basically that should be good to go. So the next thing I want to do is actually pass in like the price and this kind of stuff and see if we can get that hooked up. So I want to do this in the context of my existing tests because as we'll see, when you work in this way, you're building up this suite of tests, and if we start modifying like what needs to be passed in, ultimately we're going to have to fix it everywhere. So let's go ahead and update it in a couple of places here and just kind of update our tests. Okay, so if that didn't make sense, you'll see in a second. Basically, we're going to break our test so far. So this needs to be, let me grab my browser really quick, get a new window here and bring it over. So let's just get like, I don't know, USDC address, something like that. Etherscan, and this is just a placeholder. Basically all I want to do is copy this. It doesn't matter really, but I want to pass in an address here. And we may not even be on like the Ethereum mainnet. I'm thinking about deploying this to Polygon. We'll see. But that's the USDC address. We get the book price, the book quantity. So what I want to do is say, and actually I'm going to change this to be price, currency, and quantity, just to get rid of some of this redundance here. So we got the quantity, we got the currency, and I'm going to pass in the price before the currency, and then we need a comma here. And then I'm going to copy this same line down here. And I don't need the quantity because I'm passing it in like that, but we'll just set the price here and the currency and copy that little bit there and paste it here. Okay, so now if I run my test, I'm going to get that alone will break both tests because I don't have the right number of arguments anymore. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and make this say USDC here just because I want to make it obvious what I'm doing. Okay, anyway, so what we need to do here is just now we need to take in the what was the order price and then currency. So we'll say uint 256, and that's going to be price. And then we'll need to do address currency. And let's run that. And basically that's giving us a little warning here because those are unused, and it'll probably actually give us that warning in the test. Yeah, so you see we got these warning unused function parameters, but we're green now, so we're good. One thing I want to do while I'm here is, before I forget rather, the price is not going to be correct like this. So you would read this and say, oh, 50 USDC, but that's not what that is. You got to take into account the fact that all these tokens have 18 decimals. I think USDC has 18 decimals. Let me switch over to my, let's pull that up again really quick. So let's say USDC address here. I'm assuming, let's look at the contract. Let me actually just do a quick Google for this. USDC number of decimals. Decimals 6. So that's kind of weird. Where did that come from? Decimal 6. I don't understand why people don't just make everything have the same number of decimals. So that's something we have to account for in our code somewhere whenever we whitelist these tokens. Okay, so I'm going to make a note. I'm probably just going to throw the note in here. So note, account for number of decimals on various whitelisted currencies. And we'll make sure we're excited about doing that. Okay, so for now, how should I handle this? It's kind of weird because it's USDC. I guess what we should do is just pretend like it's every other currency. web3.utils.two-way. And then we'll say 50, and then we'll say ether. This is how you handle this in most of the time. Basically what this is going to do is say take 50 and add 18 zeros behind it, so that it's accounting for the fact that it has 18 decimal places. With USDC, that's going to be wrong. And I'm going to make a note here in both places so I don't miss this later. Decimals incorrect for USDC. This is kind of how I work a lot when I'm kind of doing this sort of stuff, just to make sure that, okay, if I've got all these notes and stuff around, sometimes I'll even put like to-do lists at the bottom of the file. Okay, cool. So if we run our test, we should still be green. We're going to have to account for that later. I wasn't planning to do that today. Okay, so what I want to do is actually just check that we do in fact get these prices and stuff back. So what I think I'm going to do is, let's say, okay, we got the balance here. We're checking how can I do this? Actually, I guess I should write a couple more tests so that we keep all these things like succinct, right? So what I'm going to do is copy this because it's basically going to be identical. And what we'll do is we'll say it correctly sets the price and currency for a book version, like that, right? So then right here, we're going to publish. We're going to keep everything exactly the same. That's all good. What we want to do now, instead of checking the balance, is we'll say let book version price equals await. And then what we need to do is pull back a book version price. And what we can do is just pass in the ID 1. And then what we need to do is book version price is, and we'll say web3 dot utils. So we have to go kind of the opposite direction of what we did above. So the two-way adds the decimals, but when we pull it back, if we want to make it readable, we need to say from way, and we'll say what is it, book version price here, and then we'll say ether, which specifies that 18 decimals again. And again, we're going to have to deal with the fact that we only need 6 decimals for USDC, which is annoying. So we got book version price, ether, and then what we want to do is assert equal, and we'll say book version price, and then 50. So this method from way, I think we'll leave things in strings. They use strings here to make things easier, which will make sense the more you use that tool. We could parse it into an integer, but I think that's probably okay like that. Let's run the test. It's going to obviously blow up because we don't have book version price, so that's what we're going to have to do. So we're just going to kind of work through this, and then we'll see where we end up. So, okay, what I'm going to do here is create a new function, book version price, and we'll say public, like that. And again, like you can do this very meticulously like I'm doing it, or you can, it's up to you. I try not to skip steps. I like to see the errors printed. The tests run a little slow, so you can make the obvious ones. Like this one's going to tell me that it doesn't have the right number of parameters. So what I'm going to do is say uint 256, and then book version ID goes in here, and now we can run it. And basically, it's not going to return anything. I don't know what the error is going to say. Please pass a number of strings. Please pass numbers as strings or boolean objects to avoid precision errors. I don't know. I guess we can console.log book version price right here and see what that does. I'm thinking that's like undefined or something, and so we're trying to convert from way, and that function is giving us a problem. Well, actually, it's not undefined. It's this whole thing here. So that's happening because we're not returning anything. So actually, doing it the way I'm doing it probably made that even more confusing. Let's just kind of do this. So we'll say returns uint 256, and this could probably be set to view here like that, as far as the visibility. Okay, so what we need to do now is actually, we can run the test again and see what it says, but what we need to do is actually implement this functionality, because this doesn't have a way to return back a number. And this may just tell us 0. No, it's still giving us a problem. What we could do here is return 0. And what is that going to do? It's going to tell me can be set to pure. So this, I don't really understand exactly the difference between like pure and view all the time. Now we have an error coming back that's more understandable. It's expecting 50, but it's getting 0. So we could actually make the test pass by just returning 50, which is what a lot of hardcore TDD people would do. And then you have to write another test that actually proves that it's returning the right thing. In actual fact, let's just do it, since that's kind of where we're going with this. So what we can do is publish another book, bookstore publish. So what we can do is bookstore publish currency price. Let's set the price again here. Oh, that's funny. Expected. Hold on a minute. You know what that is we need to do 50 times 10 to the 18. So let's run the test again. Okay, so what I was working on over here is I want to publish another book, second book. So we're going to get rid of book version. Hold on a second. Let me undo a second. Okay. Where was that? Bookstore published the price. So I want to just change the price here. I'm going to make this one 100. So basically what we're doing here is we're just verifying that there's no way to cheat. Like you can make the test pass by just returning 50. What we want to do is force the fact that we need to actually implement the, and I don't want that to be a const here. What we're basically doing is forcing the test actually validate the code really works, and there's no cheat in there. So we'll say price equals a new price is Web3, blah, 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 100. Okay. Okay, so now we should assert equal 100 down here. And so basically what we're doing, just to kind of talk through this again, we're saying, okay, create one book with a price of 50, okay, and then we sort of set up a hack so that, okay, we're cheating, it's 50. And then now we're doing another one with 100, and this is going to basically force us to write the real code. So I know this is annoying to some people, but being really meticulous with TDD and this stuff is useful. Okay, so now we have to write the real code. So what do we want to do? Right now we're just worried about the price. So we're getting the price here. What we could do is set up a mapping. And what we're going to do is say it's a uint 256, which would be the book ID, book version ID rather. And it's going to point at another uint 256, which is the, we'll say this is public. No, let's make it private. We only want people to access this through this method down here. So we'll say private, and we'll say book version prices, like that. Okay. So if you're not familiar, basically what a mapping is it's kind of a key value data store. So you can specify the types of data that are going to be in the keys and in the values. And I think you can put pretty much anything in here. Like you could have, a bytes for a hash or something like that, or you can have Booleans in here. I would assume like you wouldn't ever put a Boolean in the key because then you only have 2 keys available. But you can have like uint 256 or address or whatever over here, and that can point to a Boolean or anyway. We'll get more into that later, but that's essentially what that is. So we're going to have a number that points to another number, and then we can use that to look it up later. So before, and this is important, before we increment the current book version ID, we want to actually set the book version prices. So we'll say book version prices, And then we'll say current book version ID equals price, like that. Okay, so now we're just getting a thing saying we're not using currency. And now instead of returning this hack down here that doesn't work, we'll say return book version prices, and we'll pass in the book version ID. So basically we're just pulling out the price from there. Okay, so now let's run the test again. And if this is green, I think I'm going to wrap it up here because this video is getting a little long, and it will implement the other part of this in the next one. So expected 50 to equal 100. You know what that is I did not look up the correct book. Okay, so we're incrementing, so we're setting our second book to equal 100. Let's run that again and see if we're good. So let me just read over this while that's running. Yeah, that should work now. Cool, so we're all passing. I'm console logging something that I don't want to log. Yeah, let's go ahead and get rid of this console log, and we'll wrap this up. So yeah, that's kind of the end of this video. In the next one, what I'm gonna do is implement this currency bit, which is gonna look essentially the same. And then once we have green tests for that, what I'm gonna do is refactor this, because I don't wanna leave everything just in these mappings. What I wanna do is use, I think it's called structs, if I'm not mistaken. So what I want to do is basically create a struct for the book version that sort of stores all the data related to that book version. It just kind of cleans up the code instead of having to have all these different mappings. And yeah, so that'll be kind of the next video. So essentially what we'll have at that point is you can publish a book which has a price, a quantity, and a currency that you're wanting to use. And what we'll probably do as well, because we want to make it so that people can buy the book. So what we'll need to do is set up a fake ERC20 token that we can use in our tests. So maybe we'll set up like fake Ether or Chainlink or something like that, and say, okay, we're gonna use that as our currency, and then we will basically be able to do full transactions. So we'll set it up so you can buy the book and so on. So that'll probably be 2 to 3 more videos, just all of that. And then what we need to do is build out the ability to resell. And that's going to probably cause us to have to change up some of the code just a little bit, because right now we just have this single like book version price. We might need to call it like author price and then like reseller price. We will likely need to figure out something where, you know, there may be 2 different functions. It might be like buy from author, or like buy a specific deal, like a specific offer. So like if you think about it, like, okay, the marketplace, right? Like the author mints all these books and they've got, let's say 500 books for sale. Maybe they sell 200 and somebody decides they don't want their copy anymore. So they come in and they list theirs for sale. You know, there's some complexity to, okay, do we want to write a function that finds the cheapest book available and gives you that one? Or do we want to write a function where it's like you can buy a specific deal, and then on the front end, we actually list out all of the available deals. So maybe you have like, okay, here's the official offer from the author, which has like 198 copies remaining or something like that. And then under that, you have all the other people who are trying to sell theirs, and maybe there's some more expensive and some cheaper. Who knows? So that's kind of something I'm trying to work out. I think I want to kind of go the route of keeping it simple. I don't think I'm going to try to build anything in here where we're actually saying, okay, what's the cheapest thing, and then provide that. I think we'll probably have like buy from author, which, you know, will work as long as there are more copies available, and then like buy in market, and you have to pass in like a specific offer ID or something like that. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea. we'll get all that sorted out. This is going to be like fairly sophisticated smart contract development, I think. So to build all of that, let's set an expectation that there's probably 5+ episodes if they're all about 30 minutes. So yeah, I think it could be more. I'm not 100% sure. So just taking it bit by bit. And then once we finish out all the smart contract stuff, we'll switch gears and we'll build out a React app that interacts with all of this. So hope you're into it. If you are, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. And also be sure to give this video a thumbs up and, leave a comment if you have any questions, all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you in the next episode.